What is up, y'all? It is your boy Winston Wolf. I'm back. I just want to do a quick review. So I tend to listen to a lot of podcasts because at work I have to listen to it just to get through the day. So I was excited to see not that Dax Harwood had a podcast, but he was going to do a whole episode on CM Punk because obviously everybody wants to know what's going on, what his status is, what happened with the backstage fight, all that kind of stuff. So you figure if it's one of his friends or somebody that was there, and it's their first episode, and they're basing their first episode on CM Punk, that obviously they want to start this off with a bang. So you figure there would be something. No, nothing. It's a waste. It's a waste. And I'm kind of ashamed of myself because I know that Jake the Snake has a podcast. Some other people have a podcast. I haven't even got around to listening to that. But because of this, what the subject matter was and what any normal human being would do if you want to try to just, shoot right out the starting gate and get a head start and get your podcast off to, a full sprint, that you would have something juicy, pause, but you would have something listenable. You would have something that people not only would want to hear, but they would be discussing and talking about, and something that you could probably do follow-ups on with your next episode, kind of like when CM Punk was on Colt Cabana's podcast, and that one podcast was so explosive that the next podcast, they had to have him on there for the next week just to help tie up all the loose ends and just, you know what I'm saying? That's how big that one podcast was. So I was expecting something like this, something that was going to have legs. This was, first of all, false advertisement, clickbait, whatever you want to call it. It was lackluster. Dax Harwood and his partner aren't exactly the most charismatic people. So right there should tell you that this isn't going to be something that you're just going to be hanging on every word. The best wrestling podcasts, a lot of the best podcasts, period, but in wrestling, the best podcasts are people that have had a long career and have done a lot of things so they can go back and talk about stuff. But they're also great talkers, great interviewers. Not interviews, great interviews. Things like that. That whole combination of experience, being around a lot of different controversial people, different situations, accomplishments, being able to rock the mic, all that kind of stuff, that makes a good wrestling podcast to me. So I don't know why I thought this was going to be any good. But again, I want to hear what's going on. I thought maybe he would be like, oh yeah, he's kind of, he has been in contact with people in talking about Punk now. Dax Harwood saying maybe Punk had been in contact with people in WWE or this, or he told me this is why he's not going back, or they're trying to repair things, or, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega are perfectly okay with mending this situation for the business sake, for money's sake, just something like that. It's nothing. It's just non-charisma through the whole episode. Then you get to the very end, and the guy interviewing him is like, okay, this is what, now we're going to talk about what everybody wants to hear. Okay, wait until the end of the podcast. Wait until the end of the podcast and then say, okay, now for what everybody wants to hear. That kind of encapsulates his whole podcast right there. This is what people want to hear. Everything prior, this hour, whatever prior, nobody really wanted to hear. It was just filler. That's basically the nice way of him saying it. But now we're going to get to what people want to hear. And guess what? It's nothing. He said CM Punk FaceTimed him after it. And this is another weird thing with this guy. He's talking about he's in bed with, like, his wife or something like that. CM Punk FaceTimes him. And he still has the dried blood from the match on him. And he asks him, he's like, do you need me to come and clean you up? He actually says this. Like, what are we... What? Can I get out of bed with my wife and come clean you up? So, and that's it. Punk says, no, I'm fine. I could take care of it. And then that's it. End of the podcast. It's nothing. It's another worthless fly-by-night podcast. Where else can... You already threw out for your first episode the most interesting thing you could possibly talk about. That you could possibly talk about. And you failed at it. What else? What else besides some dirt on different wrestlers could you say for the rest of them? But you're not going to do that because they want to go back to WWE. So that's why I guarantee he's not going to talk about the Shawn Michaels stuff. If you don't know, he had a heart-to-heart with Shawn Michaels. And then once Shawn Michaels got in front of Kevin Nash and all his other friends, he started making fun of Dax Harwood. But you only hear about that through other podcasts. He's not going to talk about that on this. So if he's not going to talk about that and he's already talked about it, you know he's not going to throw anybody under the bus. He's not going to, unless something catastrophic happens in their remaining time in AEW, he's not going to have any good stories. It's just going to be him talking about his love of wrestling, his love of family, and that he likes to drink here and there. And also he said, once I drink a little bit, it makes the podcast better. That podcast was you with some drinks in you, and you thinking that you made it better. Please never do a podcast sober. How about this? Please never do a podcast ever again. Please. Unless you totally are disgusted by the business and you don't care what bridges you burn and you really want to tell some really, really interesting stories that are going to wreck people's marriages, then talk. Down a whole fifth. Swallow the worm. Then do it. Until then, stop bothering us with talking about your podcast. It ain't a podcast. I don't know what the hell that garbage was. It sucked. Dax Harwood, one and done. Ain't wasting no more time listening to his garbage. All right?